Hey, my name is Lukas, welcome to the second Project Damsel devlog. I just want to work on my game, finish all the missing parts and release the game to the world. But I need to keep my expenses under control, so I can still afford healthy food and rent and life in general when the game sells 0 copies. The most difficult part of my financial plan right now is the art budget. It's hard for me to cut features and ideas. I am susceptible to feature creep, it's my arch enemy. It's the voice in my head that always wants to add more stuff. And there's no better remedy than a strict budget. Before I do a deep dive into all the tricks I have figured out to fit everything within my budget, here's a short introduction to my game. Project Damsel is a roguelike game where you pick up stones and throw them at the heads of monsters, scoring big combos. When the situation gets tense, you can use powerful spells to defend your castle. Let's be honest, it's not going to sell millions of copies and enable me to retire. Therefore, I have to be very mindful of my small art budget of 2,500 euros and my limited time frame to complete this work of passion. A disclaimer before I start. All price estimates that I can show for the different assets are based on my research. Prices vary widely depending on your artist's fame, experience and location. I have 5 categories to which I allocate money. These are the player character, enemies, special effects, game environments and the UI. I won't talk about the UI assets because I haven't started planning them. The most expensive category is the enemies. Currently I have plans for 12 different enemies. Therefore I have to cut anything possible to make them as inexpensive as I can. The most important factor in lowering the price is to keep the animations to a bare minimum. To reach the player, the enemies need a walk and jump animation. Furthermore, most enemies have one special animation. For example, the spear goblin has an animation in which it throws a spear towards the player. There's no idle animation, and when the enemies die, they fade away. All characters in my game are 32 by 32 sprites. A design and a size cost 25 euros. Additionally, a single frame of animation costs 5 euros. On average, an enemy has 16 frames, which adds another 80 euros per enemy, totaling 105 euros. This makes the cost of my 12 enemies 1,260 euros, or about half of my game art budget. At this point, it's easy to see that just adding one more animation would mean that I need to increase my budget or cut back on the number of enemies. The biggest sprites I need for my game are for the various bosses that I have planned. My initial plan is to make them 64 by 64 pixels and have about 4 animations for each of them. Unfortunately, a single 64 by 64 design costs about 45 euros and animation costs about 9 euros per frame. So adding bosses this way would just blow my game budget. I need some magical solution for that. Moving on to the main character. Here I decided to spare no expense and I need a lot of animations. The cost is 280 euros. The only cost saving tip is that the animations for her idle and walk are almost the same with or without a stone. So I could get a small discount here. Moving on to the budget for the tile sets and environments of the game. These cost 550 euros. 2 cost saving tricks help me save some money in this category. First, I use modified versions of stock art that I have already used in my prototype. Second, I do a color swap of the environments to create some variation between the levels without additional cost. Last but not least, my favorite category, special effects. These are crucial for making the game look more interesting. The most common use case for hand-drawn pixel art special effects are the spells. A special effect helps to improve the experience. Whenever the player uses a spell to incinerate enemies with a fireball, freeze them with an ice rock or transform them into chickens. The cost for the special effects vary a lot, and all in all this category will cost me about 250 euros. The most important tip, budgets often omit something important. For example, I forgot to budget some main character animations at first and needed to find some space in the budget later. Therefore, it's always a good idea to add a 20% buffer on top. This concludes the deep dive into my game art budget for this video. I'm pretty sure that I will need to increase my budget a bit to include all the bosses and the UI art that I want. However, writing my budget took me on an interesting journey where I tried to figure out how I could create a beautiful game on a pretty small budget. You can subscribe and be notified about my next video, which covers how I create unique enemies for my game. If you're interested in how I found the art style for the game, you can watch my last devlog. Thanks for watching and bye bye.